Welcome everyone to Nikki Loves Books. Nikki here today, and so excited that we have our recap for House of Earth and Blood. So this is Crescent City Book 1 by Sarah J. Maas. This is going to be a full recap of this very large book. So be prepared that this video is long. Because of that, I did record in parts just for my own sanity. So if my makeup, hair changes, clothes change, just ignore that. As usual for my recaps, I'm going to have visuals for our characters, so that way it's a little bit easier for us to keep track of everyone. I will be working on a recap for book 2, and I'm hoping to get that out before book 3 of Crescent City drops. Like, that is the goal. Keep your fingers crossed and your toes crossed and all that I can actually pull this off, because these are very big projects to do, especially when I'm working full time. And then of course it's the holiday season, so I feel very discombobulated, I feel very overwhelmed, but I really wanted to do these not just for you, but for me. Like, I want to read Crescent City book 3 as soon as it drops, and I realized I didn't remember shit. If you want to support me in this endeavor, please make sure that you're subscribed to my channel. It would help me out immensely. Again, I will be coming out with the Crescent City book 2 recap. I will be going back to Throne of Glass and finishing up recaps for that series. And then the plan is to get to A Court of Thorns and Roses, hopefully before the next book in that series comes out. So a lot of things coming out. I also try to do book reviews. I put those on hold while I've been doing this. And then I also do book unboxings of both Owl Crate and the Bookish Box. So make sure you're subscribed to join me for all the bookish fun that we're going to have together. So getting into our recap. Just have to say, if you have not read House of Earth and Blood, respectfully, get the fuck out of here. Like, seriously, this book is so worth reading. I highly encourage that you do so, especially because I'm leaving a lot out. So this recap does include all the details that I think are pertinent and will hopefully serve you well reading book 2 and eventually book 3. But I left out a lot of the character development and specifically the relationships between the characters, which totally make this wonderful fantasy series just even better. So again, if you have not read House of Earth and Blood, I really highly encourage you to do so and not necessarily watch a recap to understand what's happening. Before jumping into the story, let us find out what the hell this world is about. Like, that is the most important thing, is kind of that foundation, and then we can move into who our characters are and what they're doing. So our setting is Midgard. Midgard is a planet that originally only had regular humans and ordinary animals. So very much oddly like Earth. But a long time ago, specifically 15,000 years ago, the Vanir showed up. So Vanir is a term that they use that covers all other beings in Midgard aside from the humans and the ordinary animals. So humans and ordinary animals were the natives. The Vanir came through to Midgard, an event known as the Crossing. So the Crossing is the event where the Vanir crawled through the Northern Rift and overtook Midgard eons ago. So again, 15,000 years ago. The Vanir have immortality compared to humans. This is not a true immortality where they live forever. It just means that they have a very slowed aging process. Compared to humans, they would be considered immortal just because their aging process is so slow. I'll give more details about specific species lifespans when we get to them. The Vanir are really hard to kill, like incredibly hard to kill compared to humans, and you should probably cut off their head just to be sure. But they do eventually die of natural causes. The Vanir are divided into different houses depending on their species, and we'll get to that in a few. Because there's a huge power difference between Vanir and humans, humans spent thousands of years being slaves, prey, food, and whores to the Vanir. Thankfully, the government has granted more rights to humans in recent centuries, but there is some serious bad blood there. The Vanir definitely see themselves as better and more evolved than humans. They're more powerful. So humans, even though they have more rights, are seen very much below Vanir. Midgard is ruled by very powerful godlike beings known as the Astrai. So the Astrai have been ruling Midgard for the past 15,000 years. They rule from the internal city in Pangera. So Pangera's up north. That is where the Astrai reside in the internal city. And then Crescent City, which is where we're mostly focused on, is on a continent south below it. So the Astrai, they are near gods, they're very powerful, and they are eternal. There were 7, now there are only 6. The 7th Astri was Sirius, the Wolf Star. She was killed by a demon known as the Star Eater. The Astri do continue to have the 7th throne shown in honor for their dead sister. The Astri each hold the power of a sacred star. That is why Sirius, the 7th Astri, was known as the Wolf Star. So they're all going to have like a star name or star label or whatever the fuck. So they each hold the power of a sacred star. They rule through the Imperial Senate, which is basically a puppet government, which gives the illusion of democracy and that people are able to vote, when in reality, it's just the Astri just saying this is what's going to happen. The Senate, which is a sham, is responsible for making the laws of Midgard. So you'll see the term civitas in Crescent City, and that is meaning citizen. So citizens are going to have a lot more rights than someone who is what they would call a peregrine. So a peregrine is someone who is a subject of the Republic. So they live there, but they're not good enough to actually be a citizen. So subjects of the Republic have to abide by laws of the Republic, but they have less rights compared to citizens. It is important to note that anyone who steps out of line, if they are not killed outright or imprisoned, they will be a slave to the Republic, and slaves are tattooed with SPQM normally on the wrist. If y'all are wondering, Crescent City is our Roman Empire. So there was that trend on TikTok where they're like, men always think about Roman Empire. The Imperial Senate, SPQM, it was SPQR in Roman times. Crescent City is our Roman Empire. The whole entire government is based off of the Roman Empire, and therefore these are where these terms come from. The beings of Midgard do worship specific gods and goddesses. There's 5 of them that we know about, and they are usually affiliated with a house. The Vanir are broken into different houses depending on their species, so we'll be talking about the gods with the houses at the same time. We have Oganos, which is the ocean goddess. She watches over the House of Many Waters. So the House of Many Waters includes the water beings. So we're talking about the river spirits, the nymphs, the water beasts, the mer, kelpies, and many others. So these are the water dweller beings. So that's Oganos. We have Solus. So he is the god of light. He's the lover of Chthona, which is another one of their goddesses. He blesses members of the sky and breath. So the House of Sky and Breath includes Malachim, also known as angels, which I'll be using angels for the rest of the video, just for ease of imagery. So angels, fae, elementals, sprites, so those who are blessed by Solus, along with a few favored by Luna. So there are a few in House of Sky and Breath that are favored by Luna, who is another one of the goddesses. So some information about the beings in House of Sky and Breath. Fae can live to 1,000 years. So Fae have about 1,000-year lifespan if they're just dying of natural causes. You have angels who they can live somewhere between 500 to 1,000 years. So they're somewhere in between. Angels were created by the Astri. So these were not beings that came to Midgard. These were beings that were made by the Astri. They were created by the Astri to be perfect soldiers and loyal servants for them specifically. It is important to note that angels are snotty and they have highborns and lowborns. So they're a bunch of pricks about like your family name, where you come from, blah, 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 blah. And we can thank the Astri for that because they seem to be very elitist. Angels also have regular angels, ordinary angels, and then archangels. So archangels are a lot more powerful than angels. While an ordinary angel might have enough power to, say, level a building, an archangel has enough power to level a whole city. So huge difference in power. There's no real way to predict like who's going to become an archangel. Sometimes it's passed down from, parents down to child. Oftentimes this is due to careful breeding that the Astari order. So they might take 2 archangels and say, you guys are going to fucking have a kid, whether you like it or not. But sometimes archangels are born into unremarkable bloodlines. So family of ordinary angels, and then all of a sudden one archangel is born. So it's also important to note that archangels are the rulers of territories. So the way the hierarchy works is you of course have the Astri at the top. You have the Imperial Senate, which makes the laws apparently, but again, this is all the Astri doing everything. So there's 10 territories throughout Midgard. Every territory has an archangel in charge of it. The archangel directly answers to the Astri. So that's kind of how it's broken down. So there's 10 different archangels that rule the 10 different territories in Midgard. They all bear the title of governor, and they answer only to the Astri. The only other information that you need to know about angels is there's also the Astrian Guard, which is the Astri's elite private legion, and it only allows highborn angels to serve. Again, elitist attitude amongst the angels, big time. And the Astri, of course, are the ones perpetrating this, making sure that everyone believes that they're the top head honcho and no one questions their power. So they're keeping this attitude going. And then we have the goddess Erd, and it is unknown who she favors. My guess is that she favors the House of Flame and Shadow. So the House of Flame and Shadow include the Daemonaki, the Reapers, the Rays, the Vampires, the Drakai, the Dragons, Necromancers, and many wicked and unnamed things that even Erd herself cannot see. So she's definitely associated with the House of Flame and Shadow, so this is why I think she probably blesses this house. The Daemonaki are offsprings of demons and Vanir or humans, but at this point in time, it is so diluted that they look mostly human. They just happen to have horns on their heads. Actual half-demons are much more monstrous in appearance, as they look more demon-like than they do human. Unfortunately, they still are treated as pariahs because of their heritage, so people don't really like them. Rays possess and inhabit other people's bodies. They like to switch these bodies often as they do not like to grow old. That is the thing to know about Rays. Then we have Luna, who is the goddess of the moon. She is the patron goddess of Luna Thyon, which is the old name of Crescent City. She does favor two houses, so she favors members from both House of Earth and Blood and House of Sky and Breath. And we'll talk about House of Earth and Blood in just a moment when we introduce our last goddess, which is Chthona. So this is the Earth goddess. She is the lover of Solus, and she calls to members of the House of Earth and Blood. So House of Earth and Blood includes shifters, humans, witches, ordinary animals, and many others to who Chthona calls, as well as some chosen by Luna. So again, Luna is involved with both the House of Sky and Breath as well as House of Earth and Blood. Shifters and witches typically live to usually about 5 centuries, so 500 years. Shifters can speak, it seems like, when they're in their animal form. Outside of the houses, there are creatures and beings known as lowers. So this is a class of Vanir that belong to no house. So lowers are obviously seen as lower than, less than the other Vanir. They belong to no house, but they do have all sorts of interesting and small powers. Because of this, they are branded as property to be traded, as they are deemed too dangerous, unable to understand laws, with powers that could be disruptive if left unchecked by the various spells and magic-infused tattoos that held them. So we have the Vanir. They're broken down into 4 houses. We got lowers who do not belong in houses. They're just property. Now we're going to talk about the enemies of Midgard. There's a whole big war at some point between the Astri and the demons of hell. Sounds like 15,000 years ago. Whole big conniption fit. So that was the first wars. So you have demons. So demons are the enemies of Midgard. They do not come from Midgard, though. They come from hell. They enter Midgard through cracks in the Northern Rift or through illegal summonings. So people in Midgard can actually summon demons to Midgard. It is highly illegal because obviously demons are a problem. So demons come in various breeds, different levels of intelligence. They range from mindless beasts that just kind of do their own thing based on instincts. They can resemble felines or canines. And then you have more intelligent humanoid type demons. Most demons have been hunted after long ago wars between realms, so there's not really demons on Midgard. Regardless, even one demon from hell can actually do a lot of damage and bring a whole city to a standstill while it's on its rampage. So what we know about hell is it's severed from Midgard by time and space, but still accessible through the twin sealed portals of the North and South Poles, the Northern Rift and Southern Rift. If you really wanted to, you could open Northern Rift or the Southern Rift to get to Hell. Hell is ruled by 7 princes who rule over the 7 territories of Hell. So you have the Prince of the Hollow, the Prince of the Trench, the Prince of the Canyon, the Prince of the Ravine, the Prince of the Chasm, the Prince of the Abyss, and then the Prince of the Pit. And every single one of those levels, the prince is stronger. So the Prince of the Pit is the strongest of the princes of Hell. The Prince of the Pit is also known as the Star Eater. He's the 7th demon prince, the mightiest of the demon princes of Hell. He's the first and only being ever to kill an Astri. He butchered Sirius, the Wolf Star, during the First Wars. what the Prince of the Pit did after slaying Sirius is what earned him that awful name of Star Eater. So it's implied that he ate Sirius after killing her, which sounds really disgusting. Vampires originally came from hell. They're a lesser demon, and it was their ancestors deflected from the princes during the First Wars and fed the Astari Imperial Legions vital intel that aided in their victory, but they still hold a demon's craving for blood. So that is why they drink blood. They're demons, and they work really hard to make sure that everyone in Midgard kind of forgets that fact. So that's all the information we got about hell and demons at this point. The other big event that we really need to talk about is called the Fall. So this was a failed rebellion that occurred 2 centuries ago. So just 200 years ago, a group of angels rose up and tried to fight the Astari and topple over the government. So this rebellion was led by an angel known as Shahar. She is an archangel, and she does have a twin sister known as Sandriel, which we'll talk about later. So Shahar led the rebellion. Ultimately, the Republic was the enemy. The rigid hierarchies, utter bullshit. Unfortunately, the rebels were defeated, and Shahar was killed by her twin Sandriel. The rebel angels that survived, there was roughly about 2,000 of them, are now slaves. They are now eternal servants of a government that they absolutely hate and fought against. They did have their wings cut off, and they're now on display in the Crystal Palace of the Astari as trophies. And of course, the warning, they are all tattooed with SPQM, so they are marked as slaves. They also have a spell tattoo of thorns across their brows, and this was done by witches, of course, on the crest of the Astri. And basically, it binds the majority of their power to make sure they stay in line and never forget their crimes. The other thing we need to know in regards to the Fall is that sprites were kicked out of their house as a result of their participation in the Fall. So they were protesting their status as non-citizens, and so they joined in the rebellion. So they were part of House of Sky and Breath prior to this, but now they are kicked out of the house and considered lowers. They got downgraded severely for their participation in the rebellion. They are also tattooed as slaves, and it's for all sprites, so just not the ones that join the rebellion. It is all sprites, and all of their descendants are going to be slaves forever. Another term that they use in Crescent City quite a bit that you'll need to know is called the drop. So the Vanir make the drop to freeze into immortality. And again, it's not a true immortality. They don't live forever. They just have a slowed aging process. So the drop is a deadly plunge into their power. Once the bottom is reached, one's mortal body expires, and they encounter whatever is at the bottom of their souls. There's some inner work going on. They only have a few minutes to race back to life before the lack of oxygen kills them or makes them brain dead. This experience does need to be made with an anchor. An anchor is someone who helps you during the drop, and they help you with the ascent. So they help you with kind of pulling you back to life. Generally, this is a family member or a trusted friend. Worst case scenario, if you don't have either of those, there is government employees involved who have a legal obligation to not leave you stranded and dead. So no one really knows what happens to your soul if you don't make the ascent. Does your soul get trapped at the bottom of your power, lost forever, or does your soul perish along with the body? Who the heck knows? But if you do not have an anchor during the drop, you are guaranteed to die. Many people throughout the ages have tried to surpass their natural power. So during the drop, they've tried artificial means to increase the power that they'll come back to when they complete the drop, and no one's ever succeeded. So if you try to use artificial means to boost your power that you'll end up with at the end of the drop, it's not going to work out for you. So completing the ascent, you attain your slow aging process, you obtain your immortality, and your body is basically near indestructible. You can regrow just about anything if you aren't beheaded or severely mutilated with your arteries bleeding out. If something does get chopped off, like your arm, and you can regrow it, it is a painful and slow process, so it's not like it happens instantaneously. But you can grow it back. So with the Fallen, all their wings were cut off, but all their wings did grow back eventually. The drop is done at a government center as they collect the First Light. So First Light is the pure, undiluted, it's raw magic. Every Vanir emits it during the drop. So that's why it's called the First Light. You know, you do the drop and the First Light they collect. First Light is super powerful. It can heal and destroy and everything practically in between. They use it for healing, and then the rest of it is handed to the energy plants to fuel lights, cars, machines, and technology. Some of it is used for spells and reserved for whatever shady shit the Republic wants. So that is the drop, and now we're going to go ahead and talk about Crescent City itself. So Crescent City is a metropolis, formerly known as Lunathion. It is similar to our world, where there's computers, there's cell phones, there's lights, cars, etc. But of course, being populated with mythical creatures and beings, as well as humans and ordinary animals. And instead of electricity, it's powered through First Light. So that is our main setting here in Midgard, as we are staying in Crescent City. So Crescent City is separated into 7 different parts with 7 different gates. So you have the Old Square, which is downtown, it's heart of the city, and it has the Heart Gate. You have the Meat Market, which is the marketplace, and it also includes the Black Market and has the Merchant's Gate. You have the Central Business District, which includes the Angel Gate, Asphodel Meadows, which is the human area and includes the Mortal Gate. You have Five Roses, which is a lot of times referred to as Fyro, and that's the Fae area, and it includes the Rose Gate. You have Moonwood, which is the Shifter area, and it includes the River Gate as it's close to the river. And then lastly, you have the Bone Quarter, which is across the river, separated from the rest of the city, and this is where the dead go in Crescent City, and it includes the Dead Gate. So these gates, there are 7 gates in the city, again 7 different neighborhoods of the city, so you got 7 gates. They're all carved from the same quartz. These gates were originally communication devices. They each have dial pads with gems, each for a different quarter of the city, along with a small round disc. So you go up to the gate, put your hand on the disc, it absorbs some magic from you, so you don't get to use it for free, so it absorbs some magic from you, and you start speaking. Your voice will then travel to all the other gates, and the gate that you originate from, that gem will light up on the other gates. You can easily go up to it and say, I need help, and everyone would know where you are. With cell phones now, no one needs to use the gates for communication, so now they're used as a tourist attraction. There's a superstition that the gates could make wishes come true, so many people come, use the gate for kind of like a wishing well, or sometimes people just kind of dick around and say funny things like, I like boobs. The only other thing we need to know about the gates is that they each bear a plaque that says, the power shall always belong to those who give their lives to the city. It's also important to know that there's always someone watching in Crescent City. Crescent City has cameras everywhere. These cameras record both audio and visual, and they're bespelled and warded to survive anything. So they are even bomb-proof. Crescent City is governed by 7 heads of the city. So there's 6 lower heads that control specific parts of the city. So you have the Prime of the Wolves in Moonwood, you have the Fae Autumn King in Five Roses, you have the Under King in the Bone Quarter, the Viper Queen in the Meat Market, the Oracle in the Old Square. The River Queen represents the House of Many Waters and her blue court beneath the Istros River. And then all these 6 lower heads are, of course, ruled over by the governor of the whole entire territory, Micah Dominitus. So he's the head of the Central Business District and the Archangel of Valbara. So he is the governor, which is why they all answer to him. And being the governor, he only answers to the Astri. So if you guys did not notice, there's no human representation here. So the humans do not get a seat at the table. There's no head for them. Again, they are seen as very much beneath the veneer. And going along with the whole sham of the government, the 6 lower heads are all appointed by Micah. Another thing to know about Crescent City, you'll hear about the 33rd. The 33rd is a legion of angels. It is the governor's personal army of angels. There are quite a few slaves in the 33rd, so a lot of the angels in the 33rd are fallen. Finally, the last kind of term that we need to know from Crescent City is the Auxiliary, also known as AUX. It is the law enforcement group in Crescent City. It takes orders from the city heads, but divided into units based upon districts and species. So the Prime of the Wolves can only direct the Shifter's Auxiliary. The Autumn King can only give direction to the Fae Auxiliary. So there's not a lot of teamwork going on here. To make it worse, the Wolves claim the Shifter Packs are the commanders of the Aux, but the Fae insists that they are. And it's also important to note that Predator Shifters do not have a choice in joining the Aux. So if you're born a Wolf Shifter, You already know your career. You're going to be part of the auxiliary whether you want to or not. And the last kind of background knowledge that we need to know about House of Earth and Blood before we jump into the story is that there's currently a human rebellion. So it's known also as the Pangeran conflict. So again, Pangera is the continent that is north of the continent that we're dealing with. So it's a rebellion conflict. It's a war between humans and Vanir. The humans are trying to overthrow their oppressors. So definitely the magically gifted and long-lived Vanir, and ultimately the Asterai. This conflict started 40 years ago. It's still ongoing. And ultimately the humans involved in this resistance are prepared to wipe themselves out rather than submit to this rule. So that is all the background information you kind of need to know before we jump into part 1 of House of Earth and Blood. It was quite a bit of information. Hope I explained everything in ways that made sense. But yeah, we're ready to start the story. Finally getting into our story, part 1 is called The Hollow, and we are introduced to our main female character, and that is Bryce Quinlan. At the start of the book, she is 23 years old, and she is half human, half fae. Her biological father is actually the Autumn King, and this is known to very few people. It's known to obviously her mom, her stepdad who raised her half-brother Rune, who is a full fae, and we'll talk a little bit more about him later, and then, of course, the Autumn King. Bryce's mom, Ember, actually fled the Autumn King when she was pregnant with Bryce because the Autumn King is a controlling alpha hole. Ember realized that he was going to get even more controlling once he found out that she was pregnant, so she yeeted out of there, and I do not blame the girl. So when she fled the Autumn King, she did meet Randall, who is Bryce's stepdad. So Randall and Ember met when Ember fled the Autumn King. They fell in love. House of Earth and Blood, so that's the house overseeing humans. House of Earth and Blood issued an official order of protection for both Ember and Randall, so the Autumn King could no longer pursue trying to get Ember and, of course, eventually Bryce back. Important things to know about Ember and Randall is that Randall served in the military. Randall is a legendary war hero and a sharpshooter, and he actually taught Bryce how to defend herself and how to use rifles, handguns, knives, and swords. So Bryce knows how to take care of herself and is very familiar with a lot of weapons. While Bryce lives in Crescent City, Ember and Randall do live a few hours away. So getting back to Bryce, so while Bryce has kept the secret of who her father is, she never accepted any money from him. However, she did get full citizenship through her father. Humans, again, are pretty low on the totem pole of the hierarchy, and they're always considered non-citizens, so they have less rights, less freedoms, yada, yada, yada. So taking advantage of getting full citizenship through her father was a big thing. So she did yield her allegiance to the House of Earth and Blood, and she claims Sky and Breath as her house. Sky and Breath being because she is part fae. While Bryce does have an immortal lifespan, she's going to inherit barely any power. Maybe she can do some cool party tricks after the drop. And definitely one of the reasons why the Autumn King is not too fond of her. She works at a place known as Griffin Antiquities, and because of this job, she wears an Archesian amulet. It provides considerable protections against the influence of magic and magical objects. They are extremely rare and valuable, and it was given to her by her boss on the first day of employment. It's a protection specifically for the job that she does. So Griffin Antiquities is a gallery that holds rare and very expensive items for sale, often very magical. It's owned by Jezebel Roga. Very much like Crescent City itself, it is covered in cameras that records both visual and audio. Griffin Antiquities does have a library hidden below that very few people know about. It is home to many forbidden books and has 2 guardians. So we have Lehaba, who is a tiny fire sprite, who is a slave, of course, and she's tasked with protecting the library, making sure that the books behave and don't escape. And she has been guardian of the library for decades. And the latest addition is Syrinx, who's a cute little chimera who was recently purchased by Jezebel to assist in guarding the books. Chimeras are lower creatures. So Jezebel Roga is Bryce's boss. She owns Griffin Antiquities. She's a 400-year-old enchantress. She was born a witch, but defected and joined the House of Flame and Shadow, and answers now only to the Underking himself. Bryce's counterpart is her BFF, Danica Fendir. Danica is a wolf shifter. Her and Bryce met 5 years prior when they both went to Crescent City University. They were college roommates and continue to roommate even now. Bryce and Danica are known as huge party girls. They get drunk and high pretty often. Their most recent shenanigans that just happened a few days prior is that they got matching tattoos down their backs that says, "Through love, all is possible," written in some fancy alphabet Danica dug up online. Well, of course, being a predator shifter and therefore being part of the auxiliary, Danica does have a part-time job at Red Near Industries. It's a human-owned research and development company. Her place in the auxiliary is actually of Alpha of the Pack of Devils, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The other things to know about Danica is that she has lots of power. So her power levels are expected to be equivalent of a Fey Royal when she makes the drop. Therefore has the potential of being the alpha of all wolves on Midgard, not just in Valbara. Danica's grandfather is currently the prime of the Valbarian wolves and has been for a very long time. He actually gave her his sword that is famous both in the city and far beyond. This sword was actually meant to go to Sabine, who is Danica's mother, but the Prime of the Wolves decided to bypass Sabine and gift Danica the sword, feeling like she was more worthy of it. This is one of many reasons why Sabine has a very terrible relationship with her daughter. Sabine Fendir is Danica's mother, as I said, and she is prime apparent of the Valbarian wolves and her father's heir for centuries, with Danica officially being second in line, but many feel that Sabine should be passed up. And everything about Danica and Bryce just tends to piss Sabine off. So Sabine is not a fan of Danica or Bryce. Getting into the Pack of Devils, so this is the pack that Danica is alpha for, so it is part of the auxiliary, of course, and it is one of the most elite shifter units in Crescent City, and they are renowned. So they're pretty famous. Danica is definitely famous, and people recognize her. Wolves are the dominant shifter packs in Crescent City, and other cities it's different. In the Pack of Devils, Danica's second is Connor Holstrom. Connor and Bryce have really gravitated towards each other, but Bryce refuses to date anyone who's not human. Bryce has a lot of fear about dating Veneer, especially after what her mom went through. So Bryce has just been kind of ignoring their pull towards each other and continues to date humans while telling Connor to just stay away. Connor does have a younger brother named Ethan, who is not part of the Pack of Devils, but he's kind of an unofficial member where they let him join in on like pack bonding activities. Ethan is Bryce's favorite person after Danica. And he is currently at the university and is their star Sunball player. Sunball being one of the biggest professional sports in Crescent City. Most recently, we find out that the Pack of Devils stopped a criminal known as Philip Briggs, who was planning on bombing a club to spread the human war happening up north to Valbara. So they caught him in his ploy, arrested him, but unfortunately, he's now getting released due to a technicality. So Philip Briggs gets released. The pack obviously takes this hard. It is their mandated day off, and so they're all hanging out together, bonding and chilling at Bryce's and Danica's apartment. Bryce goes out on a date, ends up dumping her shitty-ass boyfriend during the date, texts Connor, who literally asked her out before she left on this date, and says, "You know what, I just broke up with my boyfriend. Won't we try one date? I'll give you that." And then she decides to go out to the club. Obviously, Danica's with the pack, so she's not joining in. So Bryce contacts their two other friends from college, who they still spend time with. And the first of those friends is Fury Axstar. She is a Veneer, but we don't know what kind. We don't know her house. I kind of have a suspicion that it might be House of Flame and Shadow, but I'm not really sure. She has no known alternative form, so it's not like she's a shifter or anything like that. And Bryce hasn't seen her display any magic other than the very basic. However, she is a full citizen with a very big reputation. She's licensed to kill in 6 countries. She's either an assassin or a merc. So there's a lot of mysterious things about Fury. She has very high-powered allies. So even when people are like, we need to take this girl out, someone higher up in the chain comes through and says, you don't get to kill her. So there's a possibility that she even has allies in the Imperial Senate. Fury is the reason why Bryce is working for Jezebel. Fury and Jezebel work together on something in Pangera, so Fury and Jezebel are acquainted. The second friend that comes out with Bryce to go dancing at the club is Juniper Andromeda. She's a fawn with hooved feet and small antlers, and she's a professional ballet dancer, but she's kind of like the understudy or the backup dancer. So she's not the star, but she is a professional ballet dancer. So they go out clubbing. Bryce comes back home really drunk and high. She almost couldn't remember her code to get into her building. When she gets to the apartment is completely trash. There's blood everywhere, and she finds all the wolves, including Danica, in pieces. Literally piles of them are left, and that's it. She hears a noise behind her, and there's a demon that she chases out into the streets, comes across it in an alley, trying to get into the chest cavity of an angel, like literally trying to get to its heart. Bryce attacks the demon, gets badly injured on her leg, and the demon takes off. Bryce calls for emergency services, as obviously the angel, who is so battered she can't even recognize him, is literally dying. After she's patched up, she is arrested and taken into questioning at the Comitium. So the Comitium is the headquarters and stronghold of the Crescent City governor and those who work for him. So this is just full of angels, including the 33rd and anyone else who works for the governor. It is also a place that anyone who's a guest of the governor can stay. So it is there that we meet Hunter Athalar, whose real name is actually Orion. Called him Hunter as a nickname, which then became Hunt. He is the Umbra Mortis, the Shadow of Death. He's Micah's personal assassin. He's very good at killing, hence his name, but he doesn't relish in it. So he's not a cruel person who enjoys killing. He does it because he's ordered to. He's 233 years old. He was Shahar's general and lover during the rebellion, so he is fallen, which is why I'm like, he's forced to kill because he's literally a slave. So he's got the slave brand, he's got the halo. So he's been a slave since the rebellion, which ended 200 years ago. He's only been in Crescent City for 4 years. So he's had a few owners. The one right before Micah was actually Sandriel, so Hunt's lover's twin sister and the woman who killed his lover. So Sandriel is the archangel and governor of the northwestern quadrant of Pangera. She is cruel. She delights in pain and torture. So you can just imagine what Hunt's life was when he was owned by her. She believes that Hunt lured Shahar into the rebellion and that Shahar wasn't the one who started the rebellion. So at least he's not with Sandriel anymore, but of course he's still a slave. So his official role is to be tracking down and eliminating any demons who creep through the cracks in the Northern Rift or enter Midgard through illegal summonings. He does have the very, very, very extremely rare gift of lightning. Angels typically have the power of wind, maybe the occasional tornado, but none in living memory possess Hunt skills to harness lightning and use its destructive power. Being a slave, though, majority of that power is not within his grasp. Hunt's mother, unfortunately, is dead. She was an angel who worked as a maid for highborn angels, and unfortunately, she never told Hunt who his father was. Hunt is one of the 5 warrior teams that makes up Micah's Triari. The Triari is the most elite of the Imperial Legion units, and they're the personal armies of the various governors in Midgard. So every governor in Midgard has a Triari, and Hunt is part of Micah's. And then we have Isaiah Tiberian. He is the commander of the 33rd. He is also a fallen, and so he's a slave with a halo. He is Hunt's friend, possibly his only one. So Micah still pays those underneath him who are slaves. And we find out that Isaiah seems to be amassing his money to buy someone else's freedom, not his own. So he obviously has someone he cares about and loves. We have Naomi Boreas, who is the captain of the 33rd's infantry. She's not fallen, and she's the only one of Micah's Triari who's not. Next, we have Victoria Vargas, who is a wraith. So she was one of the few non-angels who partook in the rebellion. Her punishment for being one of the fallen is that she's trapped in her current body forever. Again, wraiths don't have their own bodies, and they like to switch their bodies often because they don't like getting old. So that is her punishment for being part of the rebellion, is that she's now stuck in the body she's currently in. The last member of Micah's Triari is Justinian Gelos. So he's the youngest, and he is also a fallen and a slave, of course, with the Dark Halo. So Bryce is taken in for questioning about Danica and the Pax murders. And while Crescent City is covered with cameras, Bryce's apartment was old and crappy, and the mandatory monitors in the hallways hadn't been repaired in decades. So all they have from the cameras in her apartment is a snippet of just audio. So there's no visual, and the audio is not very long. So all you can hear on the audio is Danica being devoured and shredded. She's screaming and begging for her life. Nothing and no one else is heard. Rune Dannon comes to collect Bryce, and she is released. Rune Dannon is Bryce's half-brother. He is a full Fae. He's the Crown Prince of the Valbarian Fae. He's head of the Fae division of the Ox, obviously son of the Autumn King. Because it's a secret who Bryce is, everyone believes Bryce is just a very distant cousin to Rune. Rune is powerful. He has just a little less power than his father. While most Valbarian Fae wield powers of flame like the Autumn King, the bulk of Rune's magic is actually inherited from his mother's kin, the Fae who ruled in Avalon. So these powers include the ability to summon and walk through shadows. Even temperature monitors on the high-tech cameras in the city can't detect him when he's shadow walking. However, it only protects him from sight. Any sound he makes, people can hear him. He can also solidify his shadows, wielding them as whips and shield, and pure torment, both physical and mental. Rune is also a star-born Fae. He's the only one currently alive. His father, the Autumn King, may or may not have killed the last star-born Fae born prior to Rune's. The only thing we really know about the star-born Fae is that they were able to produce light that was very, very bright. Unfortunately, Rune literally can only summon a tiny amount of starlight, and it takes a lot of concentration and usually leaves him with a headache for hours. His star-born Fae powers, not that grand. But he was deemed worthy enough to obtain the Star Sword. So the Star Sword is a legendary dark blade of the ancient Starborn Fae. It is part of a pair, so there's supposed to be a long-bladed knife that goes along with the Star Sword. Both were forged from the meteorite that fell on their old world. The knife was lost eons ago during the First Wars. There is a Fae prophecy: when knife and sword are reunited, so shall our people be. So very helpful, completely vague, as always with prophecies. Aside from being picky about who draws it, so you have to be deemed worthy, the sword has no power without the knife. So yes, Rune comes and takes Bryce home, yada yada yada. A few days later, Ethan reaches out to Bryce, tells her, don't come to Danica and the pack service, you're going to be unwelcome here. Bryce gets the message loud and clear. She gets it. She even blames herself. She was out getting drunk and high while her best friend and the pack were getting murdered. She decides to go to the Bone Quarter before the service. Crescent City is built alongside a river, and across the river is the Bone Quarter. This is known as the Sleeping City because this is where you go when you die. And in other cities in Midgard, it's a similar setup. Looking across the river, there's no visibility, so it's completely shrouded by impenetrable mist, and no one flies over the area. No one would dare. No one's swimming across the Istros to go hang out in the Bone Quarter. And the Istros is full of monsters that will just eat you if you tried to go swimming in the river. Bone Quarter is controlled by the Underking, who's the current leader of the House of Flame and Shadow. So the Service in the Dead in Crescent City and other cities similar is known as sailing. It is where you put a body in a boat and they're carried across the river to the Bone Quarter for their final resting place. Obviously in different cities, it's not called the Bone Quarter. There's going to be different names for the place and a different body of water depending on the city. It is considered the deepest sort of humiliation and judgment if a boat is overturned on its way to the Bone Quarter, as the soul is basically deemed unworthy of entering the holy resting place if that happens. It's super shameful for you and your family to have that happen. Bryce steals a death mark from Jezebel's safe in her office. A death mark is a coin of pure iron from an ancient long-gone kingdom across the sea, to be used as passage for a mortal on a boat to meet with the Underking. So again, you can't just go swimming in the Istros, you'll get eaten. So you do need to take a boat, but you can't just take a boat to go meet with the Underking wherever you want. You know, without an invitation or one of these marks, I think it's implied that you will die a horrible death. So Bryce steals the death mark from Jezebel's safe in her office to be able to get safe passage across the Istros to meet with the Underking. Bryce offers her own place in the Bone Quarter for Danica. Because Danica was begging and screaming at the end of her death, a lot of people feel like a coward is definitely not going to be given the honor of being put to rest. Bryce, of course, doesn't want that to happen. She wants her friend to live on in the afterlife. So Bryce goes to the Underking and says, please let me trade my place for Danica, take her. And Underking responds and lets her know, like, if you make this trade, no Quiet Realm of Midgard will accept you. So Bryce is not going to have a resting place if she gives her place to Danica. Bryce goes ahead and makes the trade. She gives up her eternity so that Danica is guaranteed to go to the Bone Quarter. And part 1 ends with the murderers being pinned on Philip Briggs. So he was the criminal that the Pack of Devils had arrested. He had just been released the day that Danica and the Pack were murdered. So it makes sense. He had a vendetta. He had something against them. So they're like, Philip Briggs did the murder. He is arrested, convicted. The world moves on. We are now in part 2, the trench. So it is 2 years later from where we ended in part 1. Bryce is still very upset from the loss of Danica. She continues to punish herself on a daily basis, including never getting the injury on her thigh looked at. That is never properly healed, and she just deals with it, and it ends up giving her pain every single day. And in her eyes, she deserves it because she feels like she failed them, that she wasn't there. She was out getting high and drunk when they were getting murdered. And if you can hear it, Nutmeg is voicing her displeasure. Most likely she's trying to bring me a spring to throw for her. So Bryce still works for Jezebel at Griffin Antiquities. She's currently doing a business deal with a vampire named Maximus Tertian. They meet at the White Raven Club. He gets the artwork, she gets paid, and they part ways. We find out that Valbara's summit is coming up. So this is a meeting that takes place every 10 years. It's a gathering of the territory's ruling powers to debate whatever the issues or policies that Asterai order them to deal with. It's held on a rotating schedule. So every territory has a summit every 10 years. And Valbara's summit is going to be coming up in a little over a month. Hunt and Isaiah show up with Micah to Bryce's work. Turns out the vampire Bryce met with, Maximus, was killed 2 hours after meeting with Bryce the night before. What was left of him was found in a pile, identical to how Danica and the Pack were left after they were murdered. They do not believe this is a copycat because no one had details. And they obviously no longer think Philip Briggs, who they arrested for the murders of Danica and the Pack, is actually the true murderer. Regardless, Briggs will remain behind bars for trying to instigate the human rebellion in Valbara. Bryce is ordered by Micah to assist with solving the murders, as she would be the best person to retrace Danica's steps in her final days of life. She would also probably have access to people who weren't willing to talk to the 33rd, and then Micah orders Hunt to be Bryce's protection throughout the day. We find out that Rune lives in a house with his 2 best friends, although he does have a villa in Fibro, but he never stays there. His 2 best friends consist of Tristan Flynn, who typically goes by Flynn. He has earth magic, so not the fire magic. He's in the Ox with Rune. The other friend and roommate that Rune has is Declan Emmett. He is a tech guru and hacker. He has the rare healing magic of the Fae, and he's also in the auxiliary with Rune and Flynn. So we find out about a Fae rite. So Faes have 2 rites that they go through to reach adulthood. One we'll be talking about later, but the second one that they go through is called the Ordeal. So the Ordeal is the final great rite to adulthood for the Fae. So both male and female Fae go through this. It's an unknown trial that the Fae go through at an unknown time. So they don't know when this is going to happen. It might be as simple as overcoming an illness or a bit of personal strife. For others, it might be as big as slaying a demon. It's the greater the Fae, the greater the ordeal. So Rune went through the ordeal with Declan and Flynn and came out with the Star Sword. So they all went through the ordeal together, which further cemented their already close bonds. Rune goes to visit the Autumn King. The Autumn King is doing some experiments in his study. He's studying how light moves through the world, how it is shaped. Autumn King wants Rune to marry the new Witch Queen of Valbara, Hypaxia Enador. Autumn King specifically wants this as he's wanting allies due to fear that war will spread to Valbara. Rune does not want an arranged marriage, but the Autumn King could really give 2 shits. So what we know about Hypaxia is she is 26 years old. Her mother has kept her cloistered in her mountain fortress, so people really haven't seen her and she hasn't been exposed to the public. But her mother, Queen Hikuda, died the month prior, so that is why Queen Hypaxia is now coming forward, is that her mom died, sadly. And then the Autumn King gives Rune an order to discreetly look for Luna's horn. So Luna's horn is an ancient Fey relic. It was forged in their home world, so the world before they came to Midgard. It is named for the goddess in their new world, so Luna is of course a goddess here in Midgard. It was a weapon wielded by Pelias, the first Starborn prince during the First Wars. The original Starborn prince, Pelias, could blind an enemy with the flash of his starlight, so very, very different from the little speck that Rune is able to summon. Since the First Wars, when Pelias wielded Luna's horn, the horn has been broken and no longer holds power. And so therefore it was on display in Luna's temple in Crescent City. But 2 years ago, Luna's horn was stolen from the temple during a citywide blackout. While it holds no power, the Autumn King wants it for the Fae, as symbols can wield power of their own. The Fae have been fading in general. Their magic wanes with each generation, as we can see the huge difference between what Pelias was able to do versus what Rune can do now. Bryce and Rune decide to work together, as the horn and the murders might actually be linked. So Bryce will give Rune access to the library at her work, while Rune will give her access to Declan to help her with her detective work, because Declan, of course, is our computer hacker tech guy. Bryce decides to go to the meat market, as that is where the vampire Maximus died, and that of course is the Viper Queen's area. So the meat market is of course our marketplace that does include also the black market. There are stalls and vendors topside, and below there are 3 different levels of flesh, so prostitution. It's mostly humans, mostly living. Every fetish can be bought. There's no taboo too foul in this area. Half-breeds are prized there because they heal faster and are more durable than full humans. The occasional veneer are enslaved and bound with so many enchantments that they have no hope of escape, but only the wealthiest of clients can afford to purchase them for even a few hours. There are absolutely no legionnaires stationed at the meat market, as it has its own laws and methods of enforcing them. So the Viper Queen, she has ruled the meat market longer than anyone could remember. She's a serpentine shifter. Her snake form is a moon white cobra. She has an inner circle, and they are addicted to the secret venom she secretes. This inner circle does include her Fey male bodyguards, who were defectors from the Autumn King's court. They're trained assassins, and not just weapons, but in the Viper Queen's specialty of venoms and poisons. It is mentioned that powers of the Viper Queen are unknown, but are rumored to be different. Something extra that mixed with her venom, something strange and old. Bryce goes to the meat market. She buys a whole 7-pound obsidian salt rock from a dealer to get the attention of the Viper Queen. So black salt is important, and it's extremely sus if you're buying it in that big of a quantity. So black salt is used for summoning demons directly, bypassing the Northern Rift. So we kind of mentioned that demons can still come to Midgard through 2 ways. One going through cracks in the Northern Rift, and the other one is through illegal summonings, which you need black salt to do. So black salt is used in various dark spell work as well. The bigger the demon, the more obsidian needed. Thankfully, you can only summon 1 demon at a time using salts. So the Viper Queen meets with Bryce and Hunt and has solid alibis during both murders, so she is definitely not a murder suspect. Bryce now owns Syrinx. Hunt finds out the hard way that chimeras are able to pick locks, open doors, and jump between 2 places as if they were walking from one room to another. So how Hunt found this out is that he was watching Bryce's apartment, as he should be, and Syrinx bites him in the ass and then pops back into the apartment, which is by far one of the funnier moments in Crescent City, and I love it. So Bryce now owns Syrinx. She's also living in this very bougie, large penthouse. And so Hunt, of course, assumes that Bryce is a spoiled rich girl. We find out that Bryce is indeed not loaded. So Bryce bought Syrinx's freedom, so no one could ever buy him again after Jezebel got bored of him and was trying to sell him. Bryce will be paying off that debt until she's 300 years old. And Jezebel, of course, is taking her payments directly from Bryce's paychecks. The penthouse she's been living in was actually paid for in full by Danica and left to Bryce in her will. The only reason why Bryce kept it is because of the extensive security and wards on the place. Through some research, Rune finds out that Luna's horn became enough of a nuisance for the demon princes that they did everything they could to retrieve it from Pelias. The Star Eater himself Prince of the Pit created a demon specifically to hunt Luna's horn. This demon was known as the Crystallos. It was a beast created from blood of Peleus and the Star Eater. When Rune shows Bryce a depiction of the Crystallos demon, Bryce is able to confirm that that is the demon that she chased and then caught trying to eat the angel the night that Danica and the pack were murdered. Rune also finds out that during the final battle of the First Wars, Prince Peleus and the Prince of the Pit faced each other. They fought for days until the Star Eater struck the fatal blow, breaking the horn, but not before Peleus was able to summon all the horn's strength and banish the Prince of the Pit, his brethren, and their armies back to hell, sealing the Northern Rift forever so only small cracks in it or summonings with salt can bring them over to Midgard. So the horn cracked in two when Peleus sealed the Northern Rift, its power broken. The Fae and the Astri have tried to fix it with magic and spells for years with absolutely no luck. They have a working theory now that perhaps someone summoned the Crystallos to hunt for the horn, and the victims may have had contact with the horn, which is why the demon targeted them. So we find out that Jezebel has more interesting things in her office. Jezebel has a dismantled gun hanging up in her office as art. It's known as the Godslayer rifle, and she also keeps the 6-inch engraved golden bullet in her office safe. Unfortunately, there is another murder victim, so this time it is a temple acolyte, and again, it's just a body left in a pile. And this temple acolyte was working the temple the night the horn was stolen. So again, there seems to be some sort of link here. Hunt and Bryce continue to get closer as they work together, and so Bryce starts allowing Hunt to stay in her guest's bedroom. Declan is able to find out that Danica wasn't merely on duty near Luna's temple. She was stationed at the temple for the 2 days before the horn was stolen and during the night of the blackout when it was stolen. Through more research, Rune finds out even more about Prince Peleus. So he comes across a story about Prince Peleus and his bride, Lady Helena, in one of the books in the library. So Peleus was the high general for a Fae queen named Thea when they entered this world during the crossing, and Helena was Thea's daughter. Queen Thea was starborn along with her daughter Helena. Thea had a younger daughter as well who was also starborn. Only Lady Helena is mentioned by name in the story. So it turns out Peleus was one of several Fae back then with the starborn power. So it wasn't just one starborn. The story mentions that the sacred objects were made only for starborn Fae. So starborn magic can be channeled through the sacred objects, bringing them to life. The horn worked only when their starlight flowed through it, when it was filled with power. And it could have been wielded by any of the starborn Fae, not just Peleus. Once it was cracked, the Fae claimed it could only be repaired by light, that it's not light. Magic, that is not magic. Hunt decides to go to the Oracle, which is a sphinx, and he wants to ask why someone would want a broken relic. Both Bryce and Rune refuse to go with him. Neither of them want to go to the Oracle ever again. As mentioned earlier that the Fae have 2 great rites into adulthood. Both male and female Fae go through this. The second one is the ordeal, which we talked about already. The first one is seeing the Oracle. This happens usually when they're 13 or when a female gets her first cycle. This visit just provides a glimpse into what sort of power they might ascend to when mature, so parents can start making unions or figure out a possible career for their children. When Bryce turned 13, she came to Fyro to meet her father, the Autumn King, and her brother Rune for the first time. Things were going well until the Oracle. When the Oracle looked into her smoke, she screamed, clawed at her eyes, and was blind for a week. So not great. The Autumn King fled the temple before anyone could discover his connection to Bryce, and when Bryce made it back to his house, her belongings were on the curb and Rune was forbidden to interfere. So that was her experience with the Oracle, so great. Rune was told by the Oracle that the royal bloodline would end with him. So also really not great. Rune obviously lied to the Autumn King and just said that the Oracle told him that he would be a just and good king or some bullshit. So that is why Rune and Bryce just steer clear of the Oracle, and I do not blame them. The Oracle tells Hunt that the horn is being sought to open the doorway between worlds, but how to repair it and who is seeking the horn is completely being veiled. So the Oracle is really not that helpful. She does say to Hunt, "You remind me of that which was lost long ago. I had not realized it might ever appear again." So a little strange that she would say that, but Yeah, that's all he gets out of her. Bryce is doing some research. She comes across a vase dated back nearly 15,000 years ago, and it's depicting the Kristallos demon. Says the vase is originally from Parthos, an ancient library in the heart of pre-existing human civilization that's believed to be a myth. So this vase is supposedly from a library that is a myth, and it's a library that was supposed to be during the human era, so before the veneer came. Another body is found in a pile, and it is a guard from Luna's temple who was on duty the night the horn was stolen. Declan, our tech guru, finds out that the audio footage, there's no visual during the blackout, but the audio footage from the night the horn was stolen was swapped. The only person who would have the clearance to swap the footage would be the person heading up the investigation of the video footage that night, which happened to be Sabine Fender. So Sabine is now their prime suspect. Part 3, the canyon. So Rune decides to discreetly ask a witch if they would be able to heal the broken horn. He goes to the med witch that has been helping out with the recent crime scenes, but he doesn't know her name. So witches, although they look like humans, their considerable magic and long lives mark them as veneer. Their power is mostly passed through the female line. Their power was inherited from some ancient source that the witches claim was a three-faced goddess, but witches did pop up in non-magical families every now and then. Gifts were varied from seers to warriors to potion makers, and obviously witch spells had the potential to negate magic, as we see in the halos that the fallen have. So Rune goes to this med witch and she's like, look, other witches more powerful than I have already looked at this and they deemed it impossible. But she shares that it is possible with all the medical advancements today that someone may have found a way to repair a broken object of power. Little funny moment that happens between Hunt and Bryce. Hunt finds Bryce's collection of the Starlight fancy horses, unicorns, and Pegasuses. I don't know, is it Pegasi if it's plural? I don't even know. It's her collection of what would be like My Little Ponies in Crescent City. And Jelly Jubilee is Bryce's favorite. She is a unicorn Pegasus. And seriously wondering if we will ever have a unicorn Pegasus make an appearance in Crescent City. Bryce and Hunt go to meet with Therion Cato. He's a mer that works with the River Queen as the captain of intelligence. So the river folk are notoriously secretive. Their city beneath the surface, the Blue Court, is a place few who dwelled on land would ever see. It's not like they have a tourist attraction that say, hey, everyone's welcome here. No, they're super secretive. There is a sub that goes from the land in Crescent City down to the Blue Court, but those who travel on that sub are by invitation only. So mer can shift into fully human bodies for short periods of time. If they went too long without getting back into the water, the shift would be permanent. Their scales would dry up and their gills would shrink to nothing. Markings on the mer were varied and vibrant, so you have different colorings. They could have stripes, they can have specks, they can have solids. They might have long tail fins, they might have short tail fins, they might be wispy. There's going to be a lot of variation here. Their magic mostly involved water, although some of them can summon tempests. The River Queen could summon far worse. It's rumored that she could possibly even wash away all of Crescent City if provoked. The River Queen is part mirror and part river spirit. According to legend, she is the daughter of Oganos. Even Micah, the governor of Crescent City, maintains a very healthy, respectful relationship with her. Many of those in the House of Many Waters can sense what flows in someone's body, so they can tell if someone has an illness, a weakness, or even venom in their body. Hunt and Therion know each other. About a year ago, there were some murders of Mare, and one of the victims, unfortunately, was Therion's little sister. They did solve the case, and Hunt gave Therion the killer to deal with. So Hunt and Therion and Bryce meet, and Hunt warns Therion about the Kristallos demon and asks him to quietly ask around. I would also like to share one of the most endearing things about Crescent City, and that is the otters. So we're talking about otters like we have here on Earth. So these are true animals. We're not talking about shifters. They found their place in the city by relaying tech-free communication between those who lived in the three realms that made up Crescent City. So they pass on letters between the Mirror in the River, the Reapers in the Bone Quarter, and the residents of Crescent City proper. If I ever had a letter delivered to me by an otter, I think I would just die from just glee. Hunt and Bryce go talk to Sabine. They're number one suspect at this point, and they run into the Black Rose Pack. It is the sorry replacement for the Pack of Devils. Amelie Ravenscroft is their alpha. She absolutely hates Bryce as she was in love with Connor. And then Ethan Holstrom is her second. So he dropped out of college and gave up playing sports after the death of Connor. He's incredibly angry with Bryce, and so are a lot of wolves, as she agreed to go out with Connor, and then she was fucking some rando in the club after that while Connor and the rest of the pack were being murdered. So loyalty in a pack of wolves is their most prized trait, and in their eyes, she and Connor were inevitable, nearly mates. That is where a lot of the anger is coming from when it comes to the wolf packs towards Bryce. Regardless of that hatred, Bryce does take the time to warn Ethan of the recent murders, and he does actually say he'll let them know if he hears anything. They talk to Sabine, and Sabine denies that Danica was even at the temple when the horn was stolen, which is not the correct information that they found out through sleuthing. So Sabine is obviously lying, which of course is sus. Later that night, Hunt and Bryce are having a moment, and Hunt unfortunately is attacked by the Crystallos demon. But thankfully they're able to kill it. They do find out that the Crystallos demon has venom that nullifies magic, which is important to know. Micah shows up and actually burns the body of the Crystallos just to keep it out of the press and not have absolute mayhem and panic in the city. The med witch that Runa is working with is at this crime scene and draws out the venom from Hunt's injury. Upon returning back to her apartment, Sabine is waiting for them there. Bryce accuses Sabine of stealing the horn and killing Danica. Sabine loses her shit, gets really angry, and reveals that it was Danica who stole Luna's horn. And Sabine swapped the audio to cover Danica's ass. Sabine is pissed because Bryce's questions can threaten the legacy that Danica left. She was a hero. Sabine wants it to remain that way. Claims that all she's ever done was to protect Danica and clean up her messes. So from her reaction, it looks like Sabine is not the murderer after all. In other news, Therion lets Hunt and Bryce know that they have found a few bodies in the past month that were dumped in the Istros, all with their chest cavities ripped open, hearts and internal organs removed, and venom that negates magic was present. There were bodies found in a similar state also around the time that Danica and the pack were murdered. With this information, Bryce no longer believes that the Crystallos demon killed Danica and the pack or the other recent murders of the vampire, Alkalite, and Temple Guard, because none of them had similar wounds and there was no venom present. Their bodies were left in piles, like there was just pieces left of them, while the Crystallos demon seems to go for internal organs. So Bryce is now thinking that something else must have come through other than the Crystallos demon. Therefore, with her 7-pound obsidian salt rock, Bryce decides to summon a demon. So Bryce, with Hunt being present, summons a demon, specifically Ados, the Prince of the Chasm. So she doesn't summon just any demon. She summoned a prince. So Ados occupies the 5th level of Hell, the Chasm, so he yields only to 2 others, the Prince of the Abyss and the Prince of the Pit. Ados and Bryce actually know each other, so he last appeared to her as a cat when she was 13 years old. So we find out the Princes of Hell can actually sneak through the cracks in either rift, so northern or southern, taking the form of a common animal. They are confined to those forms with none of their power, save the ability to speak, and they can only stay for a few hours at a time. When Ados notices Hunt, he does ask what he is doing with the black crown around his brow. He could be referencing the halo or something else. We don't really know. Even Hunt has never even heard someone call it a black crown. So Ados reveals that Hell is another planet and that the Northern Rift and probably the Southern open to other places. So they open to other realms and other planets. So the demons that Hunt has been killing for the past 2 decades may not even have come from Hell. So he's literally saying like other things from other places definitely can come in through those cracks. Hunt's rebuttal is, oh, well, you guys are always trying to come here and come to Midgard and take over. And Ados is like, dude, the 7 princes have no interest in Midgard whatsoever. And says that it is so amusing to hear the stories that the Astri have spun. So Ados is really saying, like, not everything is as it seems. The Astri have definitely been lying to the masses. Ados then switches his attention back to Bryce and asks her what blinds an oracle. Bryce ignores that comment and asks him if he knew what killed Danica. Ados just tells her to run the tests again. Bryce thanks him for that day, and Ados tells her to make the drop and can find him when she's done. The Oracle did not see, but I did. So obviously Ados is very interested in Bryce, and he saw something that the Oracle did not. So Bryce shares with Hunt that when she saw the Oracle and her father left her in the park, a cat approached her while she was crying. Ados told her to stop crying as it would only satisfy those who wronged her, that she shouldn't give them the gift of her sorrow. So he was there for her during a moment that she was very sad. So thanks to the nudge from Ados, they find out that the more sensitive Fae scent diagnostic test, known as Mimir Tech, wasn't done in regards to the murders of Danica and the pack. So Bryce and Hunt had the Mimir Tech run on Danica's clothes discreetly. So both Danica's clothes and the clothes of the vampire Maximus test positive for a drug that is meant for medical purposes in very small doses, but might have been leaked onto the streets in doses far from safe. This drug is known as synth. Synth is highly addictive, highly dangerous, and can seriously mess you up. It does give humans veneer powers and strength temporarily. For veneer, it gives them a crazy high and temporary additional strength as well. One of the ingredients for the drugs is black obsidian salt. Therion discloses that intel came in before her death that Danica was spotted dealing synth on a boat in the river, and they're not sure if she was selling or buying. The mysterious med witch that Rune has been working with is working on an antidote for synth using the venom from the Crystallis demon, but she needs more of the venom, so Bryce decides to have her injury on her thigh healed, allowing the med witch to extract the venom from her injury. Bryce finds a flash drive that Danica hid. There are 3 videos showing trials of humans being injected with synth, who then are able to take out veneer, ripping them to pieces, leaving them in piles, until they finally turn on themselves, ripping themselves apart too. It is obvious now whoever killed Danica and the pack, along with the vampire, the alkalite, and the temple guard, were all high on synth. Therion reaches out to Bryce and lets her know that there's a deal of synth happening on the river. They go out to the river and catch Victoria and Justinian with Hunt buying synth. Apparently they were hoping to use the synth and distribute it among their fellow would-be rebels to attain its power, so that extra strength of boost, to break their halos and finish what Shahar started years ago. However, after watching the videos that Bryce found, Hunt had been trying to call everything off once he realized how dangerous synth actually was, but Victoria and Justinian wouldn't listen to reason. Unfortunately, it is a setup, and Micah shows up and has Hunt, Victoria, and Justinian arrested. So they are handcuffed with manacles made from Gorsonian stones, a rare metal whose properties numb one's access to magic, rendering their power null and void. During the arrest, Micah reveals that Hunt has already solved the murders and Bryce can stop investigating. So Hunt shares his theory that Danica was exposed to synth from her job at Rednear Industries, became addicted, leaked it onto the streets, and sold the formula. When used in high doses, the black salt in the synth with the surge of powerful magic can summon the Crystallos demon. The murderers, similar to Danica's in the pack, were just unfortunate victims of someone high on synth. The murders had nothing to do with the horn. Danica just stole it to piss Sabine off and sold it on the black market probably. Danica took too much synth the night she died, driving her out of her mind. She slaughtered her own pack and then herself. Justinian is then crucified and Victoria is ripped from her body by Micah, her essence stored in a glass box, which he has tossed to the bottom of the sea to go insane from the isolation and darkness. And now we are finally at part 4, the ravine. And as always with the Sarah J. Maas book, all hell is going to break loose in the last 200 pages of this book. So there's a lot here, so let's get to it. So Justinian is crucified, Victoria is ripped out of her body and sent to the bottom of the sea. Hunt thankfully is not killed, and specifically because he tried to stop the plot. So Micah decides that his punishment is going to be going back to Sandriel. So Hunt is sold back to Sandriel. A messenger drops off a vial of the antidote for synth the med witch was able to make from the venom she extracted from Bryce's leg. Bryce puts it in the safe in Jezebel's office. So Jezebel's office safe has a whole bunch of weird shit in there now. Bryce goes to the Comitium and offers to buy Hunt for 97 million gold marks. Even sweetens the deal, offering her ultra-rare Archesian amulet, and Sandriel just melts the amulet down and declines the offer. Bryce then offers herself up in exchange for Hunt. Sandriel actually considers this. She actually knows that Bryce's father is the Autumn King. Rune comes forward announcing publicly that Bryce is the daughter of the Autumn King, and as according to the laws of the Fae, as approved by the Astri, Bryce is his father's property and by extension, Rune's. So Rune does not permit Bryce to trade herself, and Hunt is taken away with Sandriel to the summit. We find out that Rune is absolutely terrified of what the Oracle's prophecy might mean for Bryce, should she ever be granted a royal title. Because if the royal line ends with Rune, that means that Bryce is permanently out of the picture if she's officially acknowledged as a princess of the family. He really didn't want this information to get out, but he wanted to save his sister from Sandriel, so he of course had to pull that card. Later on that evening, Bryce is attacked by a Crystallos demon. Thankfully, Rune, Flynn, and Declan save her, and Declan is able to heal her because he has that rare Fae healing magic. So the summit begins. It's not in Crescent City proper. It's about a 5-hour car ride outside of Crescent City, approximately about an hour flight for an angel, and about a 30-minute flight for a helicopter. Hunt is present as he's on display as Sandriel's new prisoner. So all the leaders of Crescent City are present, as well as their heirs. So you have the Autumn King and then Rune, and then because Rune's there, Flynn and Declan are there. You have the Prime of the Wolves and then Sabine. Jezebel is present representing the Underking. The River Queen's daughter is there representing the Blue Court, and then Therion is escorting her. Sandriel and Micah, of course, are there. Queen Hypaxia is officially recognized as Queen of the Witches in Valbera, and it turns out she is the Med Witch that has been helping Rune. So she was kind of undercover, and that's why she didn't want to disclose her name. Of course, she was able to do this because she's been cloistered in the mountains up until this point, so no one actually knew what she looked like. For the summit, there's vid screens interspersed throughout the room with computers lining the tables. The Astri appear on the vid screens, and Hunt notices the others who dare to lift their eyes as they kneel to the Astri. Doing this is kind of a challenge and a little bit of a small rebellion. So Hunt notices that along with himself, Therion, Rune, Declan, and Queen Hypaxia have all lifted their eyes when they're kneeling to the Astri. Rune communicates with Hunt telepathically, sharing a power that he keeps a secret. So we find out that Rune actually can communicate telepathically. The summit is boring as hell, and as we all know, it's a sham anyway. The Astri are going to enforce what they want to have happen. And so Micah leaves, saying he has another meeting to attend. Bryce is at work, and she steals another Archesian amulet from Jezebel. So Jezebel, of course, had another one of these amulets in her safe, and Bryce went ahead and took it. She's down in the library at Griffin Antiquities, and Micah walks in down there. At the summit, Jezebel receives a text from Bryce. Jezebel has Declan run all the video and audio feed from Griffin Antiquities to the vid screens at the summit, unbeknownst to Micah. So Micah doesn't know that Bryce was able to kind of send out an SOS, like, why the hell is Micah here? And obviously they do not want Micah to see the library. It's hidden for a reason. Upon seeing the dilemma that Bryce is in, Rune orders an aux unit to be sent to Griffin Antiquities, but all the top packs and top security are at the summit. That's where all the leaders are, so there's no one really in Crescent City. Micah reveals that the library is the Great Library of Parthos. So that mythical library actually is real. So it's all that remains of the once grand library that was burned at Veneer hands 15,000 years ago. It's books that contain evolution, mathematics, theories to disprove the superiority of the Veneer and the Astri, of a world in which the Veneer are not the masters of humans. So this is why these books are forbidden, is because they question the status quo. It's a record of 2,000 years of human history before the Astri. The Archesian amulets were actually the amulets worn by the priestesses who served and guarded Parthos. It was at Parthos that a doomed human army made its final stand against the Veneer, giving the priestesses time to grab the most vital volumes that are now collected in the library that Jezebel has beneath Griffin Antiquities. It's very curious why Jezebel has these books now. She actually begs Droon to get the ox to the library ASAP and save the books. So Jezebel is fully aware of what those books are, and she's guarding them. Micah notes that Bryce has never taken off the amulet in the years since she's been working at Griffin Antiquities, until, of course, Sandriel melted down the one she was wearing. And then that night, Bryce was attacked by a Crystallis demon, and he reveals that Bryce is the horn. Danica had the horn ground into fine powder, mixed in with witch ink, and had it tattooed on Bryce's back in the language of universes. The horn's physical shape doesn't matter, its power remains, and wearing the Archesian amulet hid Bryce from any detection, magic or demonic, which is why Danica chose Bryce to bear the horn. Micah reveals that it's actually synth that can heal the horn, so it's a magic that is not magic, light that is not light. And while Bryce doesn't have the Starborn gift, Micah believes that with her bloodline and with synth, it will compensate for that, and he'll be able to use his powers on her and make the horn work. Micah wants the horn to summon an army to decimate the human rebels and gain more power, perhaps equal to the Astrai. Bryce keeps him talking, and Micah begins gloating about killing Danica and the pack. So Micah was an investor at Rednear Industries, knew about synth. Micah was the one who had synth leaked onto the streets, and Danica was trying to collect it to save lives. And then obviously Danica was seen doing this. So when she was seen on the river dealing with synth, she was trying to collect it, to destroy it, to save people. But Micah was able to use that information to blackmail Danica. It's her word against his, and him being the governor, if he says, hey, she was dealing synth, she's a drug dealer, people are going to believe him, and there goes her whole reputation, all her power to do good. So Micah blackmails Danica into stealing the horn for him. He was the one who caused the citywide blackout to give her time to steal the horn. Thankfully, before delivering the horn to Micah, Danica caught on to Micah wanting to use synth to repair the horn. Therefore, she hid the horn from him. She kind of figured, this guy's kind of a tool. He doesn't need more power. Let me hide this. He then broke into her apartment, injected Danica with synth, and watched as she ripped apart the pack before turning on herself. Micah has been summoning the Crystallis demon to seek the horn, and he has been committing the other synth-related murders to get Bryce involved, so that was why the vampire was targeted, and then nudge her towards the horn as well. So that is why he had the Alkalite and the Temple Guard murdered. Micah attacks Bryce and injects her with a high dose of synth to heal the horn. Flynn makes the lovely observation at the summit that this is Bryce's ordeal. Other than Bryce being there, Lehaba and Syrinx are also present. Obviously, Micah hasn't been paying attention to them because they're lowers, they're not going to do much. But of course, Syrinx tries to save Bryce. Syrinx gets badly injured, and Bryce is too at this point. Lehaba and Bryce are able to lock Micah in the bathroom temporarily. They know that he's going to get out of there really, really quick. And so they're trying to flee, and Lehaba realizes that Bryce and Syrinx won't make it. Bryce is so injured that even the synth is having problems healing her. And let's see if I can talk about this without crying. So Bryce reveals that she purchased Lehaba's freedom the week prior and was going to surprise her with a party announcing her freedom. Lehaba goes, yeah, I know, I snooped in your office. I already found out, and my first act of freedom is to save my friends. So Lehaba sacrifices herself to give Bryce time to get upstairs to Jezebel's office. So Bryce assembles the Godslayer rifle that was in Jezebel's office using the one bullet to shoot Micah straight in the head when he walks out of that damn library. She then pulls out Danica's sword that Danica had stored there before she died and hacks Micah's body apart. She downs the antidote Queen Hypaxia had sent to her and then lights Micah's body on fire and then proceeds to vacuum up the ash. So absolutely much deserved. F that guy. But unfortunately, this is not the end of the ordeal. So Micah's experiment didn't fail, so the horn was activated, and portals at every gate in the city are open specifically to hell, and demons are just pouring into Crescent City. So Bryce gets Syrinx safely at home. She goes back out into Crescent City with Danica's sword and armed with the guns that Hunt left at the apartment. Bryce is not going to stay in her apartment and stay safe. She wants to go to try to save other humans because she knows that the Veneer are definitely not going to do it. So there's bomb shelters throughout the city that people can rush to, but it will close within an hour and remain sealed until the threat has passed. So that is the city's protocol. The auxiliary are supposed to protect the people who don't need the protection, and the humans are just left to die. Those at the summit are watching the carnage. They're trying to relay orders to those in the city as they are stuck at the summit. So Micah had destroyed all the transportation before leaving earlier to go talk to Bryce. Thankfully, Fury, who's at the summit, is a bit paranoid and had stored her helicopter outside of the summit. So she's like, hey, I got a helicopter nearby. I'm going to summon it, and then we can go and see if we can help out. On the feeds, they see Bryce fighting out in the city, making her way to the meadows, so the human neighborhood. When the Prime of the Wolves sees this, he calls Bryce a wolf, tapping his heart a true wolf. Ethan and many other shifters join Bryce in the meadows, as well as the Viper Queen's Fae guards. They get as many people in the shelters as they can. The hour's coming up, so the shelters are closing. Bryce helps Ethan get into the shelter at the last second, and she's left outside of them when they seal. Bryce calls Hunt to say goodbye, and then runs to the Heart Gate. She stands before the gate, starts lighting up, and declares herself as heir to the Starborn Fae, and then draws a star from her chest that flares bright as the sun. She has smothered this power and kept it secret from her sire, from the Asterai, from Midgard, and from Rune. So she is a Starborn Fae, and she burns bright. Her parents knew, and then Danica was also privileged to this very big secret. Using her Starborn power with the horn, she does close the Heart Gate, but has completely drained Bryce. At the summit, seeing this, Sandriel messages the Asterai, letting them know that Bryce is Starborn and has the power of the horn. So she's both object and wielder. The Asterai let them know that they're sending help. Don't really feel like that's a good thing. While Sandriel is distracted, Queen Hypaxia removes Hunt's halo, unleashing his full powers. Hunt immediately kills Sandriel. So both Sandriel and Micah are dead. Fantastic. So Fury's helicopter finally arrives. She's joined by Hunt, Rune, Flynn, Therion, and Amelie to help in Crescent City. So they all take off to Crescent City. On their way there, Declan lets them know that the Asterai's help has arrived, and they sent the Asterian Guard to deal with the demons and Bryce. Specifically, they're going to be using brimstone missiles. So they're going to bomb the city. So brimstone missiles are gnarly. So they're not ordinary bombs of chemicals and metal. Rather, they are pure magic. They're made by the Asterian Guard, a combination of their angelic powers of wind and rain and fire, into one hyper-concentrated entity, bound of first light and fired through machinery. So these things are epic. To make them even deadlier, they're laced with spells to slow healing even for Veneer. So this is not just deadly to humans and demons. This is deadly to Veneer. The Asterai are just like, fuck it, our damage control is to take everything out. The only blessing with the brimstone missiles is that they do take a while to make, so there is usually reprieve between rounds, so I guess that's nice. The Asterian Guard launch brimstone missiles. Hunt dives from the helicopter to shield Bryce with his body when the missile strikes. So Hunt is barely alive and is dying, but he did save Bryce. So Bryce approaches the gate again to make the drop, with Danica using the last bit of herself that is left in the bone quarter to be her anchor, thus yielding her eternity. While Bryce is making the drop, first light erupts from all the gates in the city, healing everything and everyone it touches in the city. The portals begin to close. Demons fling back into the portals to avoid being trapped in Midgard. And we find out it is not a memorial plaque on the gates, but a blessing. The power shall always belong to those who give their lives to the city. Every drop of magic that people have been giving to the gates over the years is now given to Bryce. So Bryce gets a serious power up. Bryce makes the ascent and clocks in with power just a decimal point above that of the Autumn King. So this girl has immense power, and she's left with a white pointed star scarred on her chest. Now that the demons are gone and the shelters are opening, the Asterai discontinue bombing the city as they have to save face. They can't let people think that Bryce is a threat to them. Regulus, the bright hand of the Asterai and the head of them, so Regulus is the head of the Asterai, calls Bryce to give her their blessing and warning to live quietly and normally, keep your mouth shut, never use the horn, and we won't fucking kill you and everyone you love. That is his message in so many words. All others from the summit have been given similar warnings to keep their mouths shut, and as a gift for saving the city, they free Hunt. We are then left with a very interesting epilogue. So it is Jezebel and Adis in cat form. So we find out the library has been moved to continue protecting the books, as obviously someone from the government would come looking for them there. The demons that have returned to hell that were involved in the Crescent City attack are being punished. It was not a sanctioned attack from the princes, and they're pretty upset about it. Jezebel makes a comment that she thought Thea's light was forever extinguished, with Ados responding that Bryce bears her light. Ados and Jezebel knew Hunt's father, and it ends with Jezebel saying, "Don't fuck us over this time, Ados." Definitely very curious. Hopefully we'll find out more information in the next book about what this is all about. So that is the end of House of Earth and Blood. Before we leave, I did want to point out a few specific things that maybe readers miss that might be important. I can't really say for sure because the whole series isn't out. Some of the things I'm going to talk about do involve Throne of Glass and A Court of Thorns and Roses, but it's nothing spoiler related. So none of this is spoilers. It's just little tidbits that if you weren't entirely paying attention or if you read the book a while ago, you might not remember. And it just might be important. I can't say for sure one way or another just because the series isn't finished. So let's get into it. So first off, the 4 parts of the book, so part 1, 2, 3, and 4, they are the first levels of hell. So it's the hollow, the trench, the canyon, and the ravine. So it kind of is like Dante's Inferno, like Bryce is going through the different levels of hell. This one, a lot of people should know, especially if you watch Marvel, but Midgard is Earth in Norse mythology. And then the other thing is that there's a lot of biblical references. So Shahar is known as the Day Star, led the rebellion against the Astrai. Those who joined were known as the Fallen. In the Bible, Lucifer is known as the Morning Star. He led the rebellion against the Judeo-Christian God. Those who joined are known as the Fallen. Brimstone fire, brimstone missiles. And this coincides with a character actually in A Court of Thorns and Roses. So Amren in A Court of Thorns and Roses is supposed to be the angel of death, and it seems like from the Judeo-Christian Bible. She does make a mention in A Court of Thorns and Roses that he gave her a choice. He allowed her to leave. So it sounds like she's actually referencing that Judeo-Christian God. So I'm wondering if the Astrai came across these angels, and then when they came to Midgard, they created the angels in the image of the angels that they saw, or did the Astrai come to Midgard, kill the Judeo-Christian God, and then tell the angels that they created them? So I am very curious about that because we do know that Amren is the angel of death, and she does reference a all-powerful being above her, her creator, considering that she's supposed to be the angel of death. Seems like she's referencing that Judeo-Christian God. So where did the angels that the Astrai created come from? Did they see the angels and recreate them? Or did they kill that Amren mentions? The other things to note, there are a few books that are mentioned that are in the Library of Parthos in Crescent City. 2 of them are important to note. One of them is the Book of Breathings. This is a book that we see in A Court of Thorns and Roses. And in A Court of Thorns and Roses, they mention it came from another world. It's also interesting because there's a theory that that book is written in word marks. And word marks comes from Throne of Glass. And that takes us to our other book. So the other book that's mentioned being in the Library of Parthos is The Walking Dead, which is a book that uses in Throne of Glass. It is written in word marks. So word marks are a thing, which then takes us to Bryce's tattoo. So Bryce says that Danica had it written in a language she dug up on the internet. Micah says that her tattoo is written in the language of universes. Is it written in word marks? And then we get to the Archesine amulets. They are 3 gold hoops that are intertwined. That is what the amulet is. Archesine is very close to the last name of Freya and her 2 sisters. So there's 3 Archeon sisters in A Court of Thorns and Roses. Also, for those who have not read Throne of Glass or might have not remembered this fact, when Aline is falling through worlds, so she's just falling through different rifts, and one of the worlds she sees is a world with a great city built along a river with impossibly tall buildings. So that could be the Throne of Glass reference to Crescent City. And then the last thing to note is the prime of the wolves calling Bryce a wolf. Totally 100% could just be that he meant in spirit, like she is courageous, she is loyal, she is a wolf. It could also be that he was referencing Danica's sword, like possibly he felt that and that's why he called her a wolf. Or the other possibility, of course, is the wolf star. So the Astrai are down to 6 because the 7th, Sirius, was killed, and she was known as the wolf star. So, oh my gosh, that is it, everyone. If there's anything else from book 1, so we're only talking about book 1, but if there's anything else from House of Earth and Blood that you felt needs to be mentioned that I didn't mention, put it down in the comments. Let me know if this video was helpful. If you like this video, please give me a like, and make sure you're subscribed to not just support me, but to join me in more bookish fun, but to also get that notification when I drop the recap for Crescent City too. Thanks so much, everyone.